will bring in the rest.
I know. The people are just making shit up on the fly, right?
Good networking break and a good coffee break after a morning session. I now have the privilege to invite all the way here from the US, who's from our HSMAI Global Office, and he's also our CEO of HSMAI and Global President, Bob Gilbert. If I can invite Bob up, who's going to be presenting the evolving reality, the modern sales professional. Bob.
Now we've got it working. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you had a good break so far. It's my pleasure to be here today on the 10th anniversary. As Chris alluded to, my first trip to Singapore was in 2005 when we had a meeting of the global board. Many of those pictures that were 10 years old that you saw this morning. I've enjoyed the presentation so far. Ani, thank you for your remarks from Accenture. I do want to point out one correction, though, in his presentation. I will vouch for the fact I'm staying at the Fairmont here in Singapore, and their Wi-Fi is really good. So, Jeanette and team, thank you very much. I wanted to make sure that was clear. I am a President's Club member, so maybe that helps. I don't know, but the loyalty program works. What I want to do in the next 30 minutes is give you a preview of a new piece of research HSMAI has been working on for about the last year. As most of you know, HSMAI focuses on programs for sales, marketing, and revenue management. And the sales side of our business has been changing dramatically in the last 5 to 10 years. The things that are getting in the way of you and customers, for those of you that are in the direct sales role here, the amount of intermediation that we're seeing in the industry. If you're still operating a sales office the way you were 30 years ago, you're probably not going to survive anymore because so many things have changed. So we thought it was time that we really take a hard look at the core competencies that are required to be successful in direct sales today in the hotel industry. And I'm just going to give you a quick preview of what that study is looking like. The full report will be out later this fall. It'll be available free online through the HSMAI Knowledge Center, but we'll have a follow-up this briefing with a panel, so you'll have plenty of time for questions and some further discussion about that particular topic. So without further ado, let's get rolling. We'll run through just the mission and the purpose of the HSMAI Foundation, which is actually the author of the study. We'll talk about a historical review of sales and what it's looked like in the hotel industry and the different styles that you may have heard of depending on what companies you've worked for. We're going to talk about changing buyer behavior, and that's really the premise for this study. What are the new priorities moving forward? What core competencies do salespeople need to have today to be successful? Some of you may already have these. We're not implying that you don't, but we've certainly, hopefully, articulated them in a way that you can build a more solid business development plan for yourself in terms of how to do your job better going forward. And then we'll look at some specific action items that hopefully will help you. Our mission, very simply, is I think Carmen articulated this morning, is to grow business for hotels through sales, marketing, revenue optimization. So you've got a variety of topics today that will cover all three of these disciplines. The foundation of HSMAI is really our publishing and research arm. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the foundation. Many of the hotel brands and partner companies represented in this room today have corporate members of the foundation, which has a global board of directors, and they actually fund research and white papers. Some of these you may have seen, Demystifying Distribution you heard about this morning, the Distribution Channel Analysis Report. We publish the study guides for our certification programs. So that's what the HSMAI Foundation really does. Whoops, I just went the wrong. Are we not on? Just hit that one again. Okay, this one. All right. So the historical view, real quick. Selling, real simple. Any of you that have been involved in sales probably know have your own definition of, but it's a multiple of actions that are comprised, the elements that are the full range of human emotions. That's really what we're all about when it boils down to intimacy, pressure, conquest, exhilaration, intuition, reasoning, planning, coordination, measurement, and behavior. These are all the things that go into what sales is all about. You're going to get these slides, by the way, so if you can't see this graph, I'm trying to illustrate a point here, though. But really what's happened, if you go back 100 years, believe it or not, in terms of what sales has looked like and how it's evolved, original sales was really about manipulation. You've probably heard all the old stories about the snake oil salesman and things like that. And there were multiple types of things that came out of that manipulation of sales. The time frame really started back in the 1800s. The primary approach was to make the sale through any means. Hopefully nobody's still using that today. The power clearly resided in the seller. The role of the prospect of the buyer was to believe that the impossible was true, right? Have we heard of that before, the old snake oil salesman? The relationship was sporadic occurrences. In the 1800s, the wagon pulled into town and somebody got out and did a show and tried to convince you that their product was the best thing ever. The sales technique was really bait and switch. And the descriptors, also used car salesmen, at least in the States. I don't know much about used cars here in the Asia region, but clearly in the States, they're known as some of those snake oil salesmen. The discipline evolved from manipulation to really control, where the father's knows best mentality, meaning we were the specialists and we know what selling is all about. The power still remained with the seller. The role of the prospect of the buyer was to listen and to learn. Clearly, that one doesn't really work today. And that they could imagine what they could be if they owned or used your product. The relationship was really standard interactions, utilizing phone, drop-off, meetings, advertising, those types of things. And the sales technique was the product or service is the best way to solve your problems. And the descriptors here are the smooth, wine and dine, and charisma. And you saw a lot of salespeople, not only in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, even 50s and 60s. I know when I first entered the business in the 80s, it was known as the Susie Smiles approach to selling. And in some areas of the world, that actually still exists, believe it or not. The more contemporary approach in the evolution of sales is the consultative method, which many companies still use today. A lot of training companies base their sales approach on this consultative approach. It's identifying the prospect, their buyer needs, and connect the benefits of the product. The whole features and benefits process that we've probably all had drilled through our heads in any type of sales training that you've been through in your career. The power still resides in the seller. The role of the prospect of the buyer is to seek advice, a greater understanding of what the seller has to offer. I think most of us learned, at least I'll speak for myself, going through sales training in the 80s and the 90s, that you had to qualify your prospects and ask lots of good questions, learn as much as you can about those potential buyers. The relationships was the salesperson as an expert creating a win-win situation for an individual client. And the sales technique was really structured for efficiency, demonstrate the relationship between the benefits and the buyer needs, that whole needs and wants. And the descriptors is someone the buyer likes to do business with. So relationships were so critical to this whole process. What the evolution now, though, I think those of you that are in the business today, for some of you, this may be the only style you really know, but this whole concept of collaboration. And there's some similarities to the consultative sales approach, but this is really about solving problems and providing advice and working together. The biggest change in this whole evolution, though, is where the power resides. We're going to talk about that because the power really resides in the buyer today. It's a very different environment. Regardless of the supply-demand balance in your particular market that you sell, the power resides in the buyer. And this has really transformed the landscape of how sales is done today and how it has to be done in the future. The role of the prospect or the buyer in this scenario is to take a broader perspective, find solutions that benefit their organization. And so if any of you are working on a global account management system, some of the global brands have really been some of the early adopters of really trying to develop account management on a global basis. So some of you may be seeing the benefits of some of this already. The relationship is a complex exchange of advice, solutions, ideas, mutual benefit, and it's usually long-term. The sales technique is really an integrated team approach. It's not about John, the superstar salesperson. It's an integrated team approach to solving problem, planning, and analysis. And the descriptors are really, it's insight or buyer-oriented. So where the industry is right now, it's most of people are toggling back and forth between consultative and collaborative, or there might have some blurred lines between those two. But that's really the premise of the whole report when it comes out. It's how has the discipline evolved over the decades, and what do you need to know today to be successful in the future? And again, just to reiterate, the biggest change in this evolution is where the power is. If the power is with the buyer today, it's no longer with the seller. So the salesperson is not in control. So what's driving this? So let's talk just for a minute about the impact of the changing buyer behavior. This is probably not a new topic. It's probably not a surprise to any of you, but there's some facts we just ought to really summarize. We no longer control the sale. We no longer control the information. Information is available everywhere for anybody who wants to learn anything about our hotels today. The process approach is based upon past reality. You can influence the buy, but you can't form how the buyer thinks. Whether they're talking about your reputation, your social media scores, your hotel's ranking, your Wi-Fi, all those things create a perception in the buyer's mind that you can no longer control, either about your brand or your individual hotel. The buyer's more educated, engaged, knowledgeable, sophisticated, and it's had more experiences than any generation of buyers that we've ever had before for hotels. Whether you're talking the MICE market, you're talking about the leisure market, you're talking about the corporate market, this transforms all market segments in terms of today's generation of buyers and actual consumers for hotels. The implication is that this buyer has global knowledge and capacity. If I'm going to go to the UAE next week, I can zoom in on Google Maps. I can look at the hotels. I can look at geographically where they're located. I can pick one based on where I want to do business, where I want to be close to. I can do a street view of it. I can do anything I want. It doesn't matter where. You have this global knowledge capacity that's really unlimited in the scope. I can look at reviews. I can go to their website. I can go to their brand site. I can basically do a number of things. I can go to third-party sites like Cvent and others and request information. There's a plethora of information I can get before I've even talked to you, the salesperson. It does not require human interaction anymore to obtain this basic information. And this is the biggest flaw I think we see globally. So many salespeople think that their primary role is to provide price, availability, booking, and then evaluate a proposal or a piece of business. That used to be a primary role. That's not you don't provide value in doing that only anymore. That can be automated. So here's the challenge. You've got this rising complexity that requires a broader view of the client, less linear approach to buying, and to meet that challenge, you've got to match the approach to the reality of the client and identify what gaps you may have in your processes currently in your sales operation. Whether you're a hotel, unit level, or a regional office, there are probably gaps in your process that really need to be addressed. And when you do this, and we do it together, that will advance the position of the profession of sales. Not until we do that are we going to advance the credibility of the profession and increase the value of what you do and what you bring to your company. So moving forward, what do? Rather than bringing nothing to the table in the world where digital marketing and revenue management is certainly having an awful lot of impact in how business is done, sales professionals have to move far beyond being just a helper, assistant, a satisfier, or a controller. That doesn't work anymore. The art and science of selling, what's going to happen is the evolved sell is going to take the salesperson that's going to identify the insight into the client Focus on specific situations, both internal and external within your organization. And that will reframe the discussion that you're having with clients and your people internally with your organization. Are we asking buyers the right questions? What should we be concerned with? And are we revealing any of the needs that we need to be unaware of? So when you take all that into consideration, there's really 4 priorities that this study identifies that really begin to form 4 of the critical core competencies of what we're calling the sales professional of the future. And I use what Ani said, we've called it the future, but it really is now. Just like you said about mobile, it's not about the future, it is now. The first one's to be a strategic collaborator. The second one's to be a source of reliable analysis. I think we've all witnessed the number of business intelligence and analytical tools we have access to now. This is part of it. The third one is to effectively manage demand to create value. The fourth one is to utilize a progressive development process. So let's talk about these 4 real quick, and then when we get to the panel afterwards, we can dive into some more questions you may have about some of these study findings. Strategic collaboration implies both internally and externally what's happening in your organization. Internally, the support of a fully integrated team. Does everybody know what's going on within your sales, marketing, revenue management operation? Is there collaboration about basically high demand periods, low demand periods, what types of owner's objectives you have, what does your asset manager want to do with this particular asset, how do you want to be perceived and positioned, all those types of things that many times the salespeople have not been at the table in some of those conversations. That has to change in this method of thinking. Externally, recognize that the client may not always be the decision maker, or in this day and age, not the sole decision maker. For those of you that are partners in the room selling to the industry, you probably can definitely relate to that, because you know that the hotel industry is so fragmented, you frequently have many decision makers in the process to close a sale. But we're talking about the client, meaning have we sourced meaningful extensions of the current demand? You know, what is your demand trends or their demand trends, and what else can that client bring to the table that makes you look more knowledgeable about their total demand picture, rather than just the fact that they have an event coming in on these 2 dates in July? Can we extend the connection with the current clients? Have we found those bridges, and who can influence that potential buyer? Can we source and quantify the potential clients, all while supporting the mission of our organization, whether that has to do with your rate integrity, your positioning in the market, the mix of business that your product is best suited to serve, any of those different types of things. Strategic collaboration requires superior listening skills, the ability to negotiate, and the ability to think differently. And that's different for salespeople. A lot of people have always been the very type A personalities, the ones that want to go out and certainly entertain. We all like a drink now and then, right? But being able to listen, not just speak, negotiate and think differently. The source of reliable analytics, let's talk about that one for a minute. We talked about all the different business intelligence opportunities that exist today. Many of them, even 5 years ago, didn't exist. That's really changed the landscape of the amount of information we have to make good decisions. And for most of you, your revenue managers are really on top of that. But we have to be able to leverage that and produce and present timely, useful, creative information that provides ideas, trends, and facts to management, ownerships, and clients. So while your revenue managers may be looking at the BI to make decisions about pricing and general availability, you may want to look at other types of information about potential clients that really help you bring a real value package back to whatever you're trying to propose to your organization to get them to accept. This types of analytical work requires critical, conceptual, and creative thinking skills. And you'll see training modules that will be coming out later that will dive into some of these a little bit deeper and more differently. The third area was managing demand to create value, and there's really 2 aspects to this one as well. One is for the client, and the other one's for the company. Well, you may say, well, it's not my job to help the client grow their business. Well, depending on what type of whether it's a business traveler or leisure traveler or a meeting and convention, it may be. That may be the client's objective, is there to grow their business or some type of business development. Internally, the revenue management is not the only role of the revenue manager today. Revenue optimization is the role of everyone, and that's looking not only at your total revenue capture, but also what's the actual margin or the profitability per channel. If this requires financial management knowledge. The biggest example I've seen of this recently in the sales space is the amount of group intermediation that's happening globally from a lot of the group intermediaries. We did a benchmarking study last year for 10 global brands, and we found out that for these are major global brands, some of you are in the room, the amount of group intermediation per brand ranged from a low of 18% to a high of 65, that's a 65% of their total group business for a global sales office. That's huge. And so what companies that some have done is they've actually realigned their global sales teams to manage key accounts that are intermediaries, which really fuels the fire. Well, how do you do this? This is just like accelerating your road to lose more money from what that cost of acquisition is of that piece of group business. So we've got to figure this out. Revenue optimization will continue to be an absolutely driving strategy, not revenue management, but revenue optimization. There's another study you may have seen in the HSMAI Insights newsletter just a couple weeks ago. There was a study that was a survey of 500 hotels over the last 5 years, and they showed that their total cost of customer acquisition, meaning sales and marketing expenses, all commissions, all the different intermediation fees, all your transaction fees, all your SEO, SEM fees, these expenses or cost of customer acquisition are growing at a rate of 2 to 3 times faster than total RevPAR growth. Now think about that for a minute. If you're the owner of your asset and your sales and marketing expenses or cost of customer acquisition is growing at a rate 2 to 3 times faster than your RevPAR growth, and that's the trajectory you're looking at on your P&L, that's a problem. So somewhere there has to be an alignment that forces sales, marketing, and revenue management to do business more effectively. And this is where that revenue optimization role is going to continue to have a primary focus for all of us in an integrated world. In 2015, the HSMAI Foundation will be publishing the second edition of Distribution Channel Analysis. I think that you may know that was one of the publications that Cindy, you saw this morning, was co-authored. We're doing the field work right now on 26,000 hotels to do that. And for those of you with global brands, many of your companies are submitting data and participating in that. But that will continue to help us understand how do we need to optimize channels better, because the cost per channel of business may make a huge difference on which channels you may want to participate in. So all this managing demand to create value has a number of implications that are really important for salespeople today to understand. You don't have to do all the analytics of this day in and day out, but you need to understand what the impact is on this to your hotel and to your owners, because if you don't understand that, you're not going to be able to align your sales efforts with the best intentions of your individual asset or hotel. Develop in-depth customer insights. I have to give a kudos here to many of the brands are doing a really good job of this through some of their customer focus groups and things like that. You know, there's customer behavior is changing so quickly in all market segments globally. Everybody has to continue to focus on developing the customer insights about your different segments. Entails research, keen attention to detail, and strong analytical skills and team collaboration. So this is something that will be a more important role of sales in the future than it has been historically. And the fourth and final theme that we think is really critical for salespeople going forward is this issue of a progressive development process. What are you doing for yourself personally in terms of your personal development? You know, if you went through an old sales training program 10 years ago, that doesn't cut it anymore. If that same program is being taught, that doesn't work. You've got to make sure you've got a very progressive approach. You've got to build new technical and behavioral skills. You've got to, there's a shift in business strategic thinking to defining value. How do you add value and how do you expect value from a relationship? Skills are required to the ability to plan and to build strategy. That's a very different sales training message than the 7 steps of a sales call. Think of your company as a collaborative sales organization. To accelerate the experience, what actions or policies or traditions or practices would you start, stop, or continue doing in your sales operation tomorrow? What things are obsolete that really provide no incremental value to what you're doing for you or your customers? And all these apply to you and your team. So I think you should be looking for, and we'll certainly be developing more tools and resources to help train people. We're actually revamping our CHSE, our sales certification program, to reflect these new competencies. The revenue management and the digital marketing certifications we already have do reflect some of these for those core competencies. But sales will continue to change, and every one of you will have the responsibility of looking after your own professional development. Don't wait for or expect your company to do all of it. Your company has some responsibility, but what can you do specifically to take charge of that? So those are the 4 areas. Being a strategic collaborator, be a source of reliable analysis, effectively demand to create value, manage demand, and then also utilize a progressive development process for you and your entire sales team. So that's really the summary, if you will, or a preview of what the study is going to address in terms of how the role of the salesperson has evolved. So just to wind down, let me summarize with a couple of things that are already in place, hopefully you know about within HSMAI or our resources that can help you in some of these. If you haven't been to the website in a while, you certainly should. Your membership will get you into the Resource Center, which is a global repository of all the research, white papers, best practices that we've gathered from around the world. The site now, you can hit the translate button, you can translate it into virtually any language, including multiple versions of Chinese. So if you like something that's non-English specific, you now have that resource available to you. The site has everything divided into 3 categories: sales, marketing, and revenue management, which certainly are the 3 core pillars of our mission. So you can find everything very easily in the navigation of the site. You can also sign up for RSS feeds on anything new that are loaded in your particular individual areas of interest. CHBA is a certification program that actually has been very popular in Asia. We have a couple of brands that have put multiple people through it. I think Hyatt's put about 150 people through it. Minor hotels put all their executive committees through it. But business acumen certification is basically, it's online gaming. And I don't mean for winning money, but an online gaming program is a simulation where you and a group of colleagues actually operate a hotel from the point of view of a general manager. You make decisions about distribution channels, about pricing, about staffing levels. You get to run a restaurant, all sorts of fun stuff. And what happens is at the end of the week, you and your team get an income statement for the hotel. So part of the business acumen, and this works for anybody, not just salespeople, is it helps you understand how to read a financial statement, an income expense statement, and a balance sheet. And at the end of 4 weeks in this simulation, the team with the P&L with the biggest bottom line wins, right? So a lot of companies like to do this on a private label basis because it becomes very competitive with the teams that are trying to compete to make the most money. But you can also do this individually, and that's called the CHBA certification. It takes probably 2 to 4 hours a week for 4 weeks to go through the program. All online, self-paced, on demand. The other report I referenced earlier, if you haven't downloaded this or referenced it, it's free online. The Distribution Channel Analysis Report will change your thinking about how you should be optimizing your channel mix within your hotel. It looks at reservations direct, it looks at all your group, all your OTAs, all your GDS, all your different channels. And it actually, based on a sampling of 26,000 hotels, they were in the US, but we found that most of the modeling does work around the world. We looked at the actual average rate, as well as the bottom line contribution of the cost of each of those channels. This is the report that came out 2 years ago. About 20,000 copies have been downloaded, mostly by ownership groups. So if you haven't read it and your owner has, you better read it before they come to you and want to talk about it. An updated version will be available online in first quarter or in 2015. And the third resource, or the fourth resource I just want to remind you about is our revenue management certification program. Even if you're not a revenue manager, you should download the copy of Evolving Dynamics of Revenue Management. You know, if you're in sales and marketing and you need to work with your revenue management team, you need to understand what that is today, because that is going to continue to increase in terms of the importance in their role. If you are a revenue manager, you should get our certification program, the CRME. Again, it's all online, self-paced, on demand. We have a number of companies, I think there's some folks here from Preferred. Preferred has that going on globally right now for all their revenue managers. Make sure that you understand the implications of revenue management to your job, whatever function, whatever it may be. So those are some of the functions that are available now. The full report will be uploaded sometime this fall. They're doing the final edits on it now, but you've gotten a preview here of what those highlights are, and I know in the panel that follows we're going to talk more about that. With that, I think we're going to move over to your panel, Lucas. Is that right? We're going to save questions for there. Or do you want to take time for questions now? No, we're going to go to the panel.
Sure.
Turn it over to you, Lucas.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much.